Hello, everyone. Welcome to yet another episode of Contact Lost. I am Tweak, your host, and with me today I have my co-host Joker. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi, dude. And with us today we also have our guest who is becoming the staple of the podcast now, the best Necron in Poland, Gito.
Hello, everyone.
So nice to have you. So cool. I'm so happy. We are gathered here today because I had this great idea. I've been playing a lot recently, and I noticed that I don't know if it's my age or I don't know, undiagnosed ADHD or something, but I keep forgetting stuff during the game. Uh, it's not so bad during like TTS games and warm up games or training games, but as soon as I go into a tournament, like a physical tournament, where I have to play 3 games on the clock, and then in between rounds, rearrange the table, set up terrain for someone, blah 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 blah. There's just so much stuff going on that I notice that I lose track of stuff, and very often I forget things. Like recently, I went to the tournament, I forgot my objective markers and my tape measure, but that's another story. Uh, but I thought that it might be a good sort of topic to discuss and to focus on the things that we very often forget during the games. And I guess all of us forget stuff. I know I do. I saw Joker forget. I was curious whether Gita also forgets, and maybe whether we together could brainstorm some ideas of how to tackle this, how to approach those things that forget them, so that we don't forget them. And I thought it might be a good idea to do this in the way that we did in previous episodes, where we have our pro player, so Gito from Team Poland, we have the top to mid table terror Joker, and then we have the scrub in me. And on those 3 skill levels, we might have some different approaches to stuff. So we might have some different, I don't know, memo techniques or something like that, or some other methods to simply not forget. I think that's that, and I hope you will enjoy it. Will find it useful and fun as well. So before we get into that, Gito, I'll start with you. How have you been? And are you enjoying your Grotmus Necron detachment?
Okay, so I'm gonna start with the Grotmans
Oh no.
detachment.
Just
They
remember,
knew
You're
Joker
asking about
news. Joker
Necrons.
news.
No.
I know.
Okay, I gotta be short on it. I think it's the greatest thing that happened to Necrons this edition, and it allows the playstyle and overall approach I love. So I'm the happiest grot out there after
Okay.
this detachment, so that's good. And for my personal stuff, I'm quite okay. I've been playing quite a bit of TTS because I'm traveling around and I'm very often staying late somewhere in hotel. So what else to do? Yeah,
Hmm.
and I'm having fun in Warhammer, and I enjoy playing it, which is for some people very weird to hear. So yeah, I'm enjoying my life, let's say, and enjoying Warhammer still.
It's great to hear because I don't think that applies to everyone. What you just said, like enjoying Warhammer and so on. In no, I mean, like recently, I tried to invite some people to the podcast, like some of our staples, without calling names, but everyone knows who I'm talking about anyway. And at least 2 people told me that they are so burnt out with the hobby and they are so burnt out with the game and the year-on-year grind and so on, that they just want to step away and do other stuff. Another bloke who lives not so far from us told me he doesn't live as close to us anymore because he moved to a different city where there is actually social life now, and he just put Warhammer on hold. So it is refreshing to hear that actually there is someone who still wants to that
Well,
with us.
w- well, there is a small point on that. I'm not running to be a part of Team Poland this year, so
Hmm.
there is less like artificial pressure, let's say, that I put on myself. Now I'm doing it for fun this year. Maybe next year I'm gonna go back to the grind, as you said, but this year is just a hobby for me, and it's working
Hmm.
great. It's like renew my interest in the hobby.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. So okay,
So
all
with
right.
the renewed interest, don't you get like the renewed desire to be part of the team as well?
I do. I do, and I try so much to don't this year to don't attempt it, and I think it's a little bit too late to try it. But yeah, I told myself I need a break here from being super competitive, and I think I play more than I was super competitive last year because I was a little bit burned out, and now I'm not. So, but it's working well.
Good. Joker, how about you? Are you enjoying the hobby? And what have you been involved in recently? New year, new army, or sticking to your old
Well,
concepts?
I'm waiting for a new army to be released, and then it's gonna be new army. But so far, I mean, the Grotma's detachments have been a bit rough on me, and
Mm.
doubled up with the what you call it, the balanced data slate and or points updates. It's been a bit too much happening at once, and December wasn't exactly easy on me either, work-wise, family-wise, etc. So I feel like I'm a bit on the back foot. So it's trying to catch up now is the name of the game.
Mm. Okay. All right. So maybe this
What
topic
about
will be
yourself?
helpful. Oh, me. Uh, so I've been enjoying the new Custodes detachment. Uh, I actually just ordered the third Contemptor Dread. So because I just love the Dread detachment so much. Um, it's like the win rate is like 50 50-50, but it's simply enjoyable. There are new ideas, new concepts, new approach to the game. I love it. I've done a ton of modeling as well because I want to be prepared for the tournament that we're both going to in February. So I want to have everything tip top, painted, modeled. Nice flowers on the bases and stuff like that. So yeah, that's been the focus recently. And like Gita said, it's refreshing. Simply, I feel refreshed. So that's great. All right, listen, guys. I think it's a good moment to actually start talking about the topic that we brought people in for. So I love the because Joker made a note of this things we easily forget during a game of 40k in no particular order, as if to emphasize the message. We are going to brainstorm this, so there's not going to be an order like pre-game, during the game, or after the game. It's going to be whatever comes to our mind, I guess, and then hopefully you'll find it useful and something that you relate to. So
Going
Joker,
to be
first,
disorganized and chaotic, as the majority of things we do.
exactly.
Probably not exact, which probably doesn't make Tweak very happy. But here we are.
Ah,
You were saying,
I was saying, do you want to start with your first idea potentially? Is there anything, I don't know, in our games that we've played recently, or in, at a tournament that you've been to, that you forgot that maybe was a game changer, or that you remember up to now because it was such an important thing?
well, the first thing that comes to mind is actually something that did happen during a little game yesterday. So there was a situation where I was wary of a heroic intervention that you might be able to do. And I was considering different charging options, a more risky one, so a further charge to potentially avoid a heroic intervention that could wipe out my unit. And then, thankfully, at some point, you reminded me that you don't actually have the CP available for a heroic intervention, which made my decision much easier, and I was able to go for the shorter charge that I initially intended to go for.
Yeah, my bikes, Custodes bikes, still remember being killed badly. So
Well,
yeah.
I was going to say how they remember when they're dead.
Okay, I
Um,
remember.
so the point I'm trying to make is I think it's quite easy to sometimes forget the track of CP. What people often do is use a die, a six-sided die, put somewhere on a table, probably on top of a ruin. You might not always change it around, or even if you're using the Tabletop Battles app, you might not always be up to speed in changing the amount of CPs. When did you get? When was the point someone gained a CP? When did they spend it? During which round? And then it gets all chaotic, and nobody knows how much CP they've got. And as you can see, it even happens playing TTS, right? If you're using the FTC map base, which I think the majority of people are. There's also a gain CP button, but it's locked into the round, so you can only get one CP during a round. So you have to make sure you use it when the right round number is displayed on the battle round counter, if that's what you want to call it. So yeah, I think that's something that's very important, and well, you might not forget having CPs, but you might not be tracking them correctly, and if you're not, that might impact your game plan or the plan for the current turn that you're trying to play.
Agreed. I actually that's something that I've seen during the tournament that I went to on Saturday. Uh, I have those neat metal dice. That's one thing. The metal green dice that are, well, they stand out on the table, and I don't use them for anything else because I only have 6 of them. It's like a collector's edition or something. So I use these specifically for counting CPs, and I don't mistake them with any other die. Um, and the same goes for, like, I have the LGT dice that are bigger than any other dice that I have. They look completely different, and I just use them either for like counting turns or counting CP, depending on like what is more important, or I count my opponent's CPs with that as well. So
Mm.
at least at some point during the game, I can ask, like, look, the die is showing like this and this. Is this your CP count, or like do you have more? And that way, I can keep track of my CPs and his or her CPs, and it just seems to work wonders. So good
Yeah.
job. Have you ever had an issue like that? Or
Yeah,
yeah.
obviously, if you play this game for so long, you had an issue like that. But I just followed the points you guys mentioned. But also, I would add to whatever my opponent keeps SCP and it keeps them somewhere. So sometimes people put them on the ruin, some they put on like some type of counter on containers or whatever, maybe off the table on something else. Whatever it is, I always keep my CP count just next to my opponent. So no matter when I check or he changes something, like it's always in the same place. So you don't need to look for two different spots to track the CP. So I just always put my CP counter next to my opponent, whatever he puts it. And also, I am in the lucky spot to have one very specific and very special dice that I count CP with,
Mm-hmm.
which is golden and have WTC on it. So yeah, it sticks out a little bit. So I
I
have
have
this
one of
one
those as
dice,
well.
yeah, to count
This
CP
bad
with.
boy.
Ah, there you
Yeah,
go.
this bad boy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, so that is really cool.
yeah.
All
Uh,
right. Yeah, Joker.
Yeah, I was just wondering, do we have any ideas how to mitigate that? So I think Gito gave us one option. So just put it next to your opponents, putting on a bit of pressure on them to remember it, maybe. Tweak, any other ideas how to effectively track CP?
I mean, yeah, we've mentioned stuff like dice and so on. My general piece of advice, or something that works for me, simply, if the tournament venue allows for that. Like if your table is big enough and maybe you have some area also outside of the mat on the table, usually people like put their minis or a book or something over there. Just reserve some space for admin. So reserve some space
Mm.
for counter wound, well, maybe not wound counters, but CP counters, some space for maybe you want to set some dice aside to speed up things because you don't want to collect like all the dice from all over the table to roll. You might want to have some dice already prepared to make that just a little bit faster. But also, the place where your cards will lie, so they don't mix up with the ones that you discard and so on. So just like an admin area on the table, I'll call it that for lack of a better word. And I think that could work wonders for you. So that's something I would suggest, because once you have that area and you know what should be there, your CP, his CP, your cards, discarded cards, done cards, what have you, and you make a habit out of it, it it will streamline everything that you do.
Yeah, I agree. And if you have like pre-made game counters, because I see some people use it, so you have like a CP, battle round, and score you get, and you put like the dice in the correct paces when the things happen, and when the game progresses you just move the dice to next battle rounds and so on. So I see some people use it. I never use it myself, but I feel it helps some people to do the admin. As you said, you have like a plate, plastic
Hmm.
plate with the rollers, and you can count stuff on it.
Okay. So I'll use that to segue to another thing, which I actually made an observation about during the tournament on Saturday, which doesn't happen in my TTS games. And I think this boils down to the fact that TTS has spoiled me. I just love the order that you have in TTS games, where the terrain never moves because you just cannot nudge it. Although yesterday we proved that you can when you play the ritual. But the terrain is always there. The dice, you just press delete, they disappear, or you roll them and they get rolled. You draw lines. Everything is so orderly, and I love it. And then I find it problematic when I go to a live tournament that the order is not there, because dice lies everywhere, the terrain moves, blah blah blah. So one thing that I noticed that I do only at tournaments and real life games is messing up or forgetting about wounds and counting wounds lost, I mean. And I noticed that when I um, mark the wounds that my vehicles uh, lose, I usually use, because I hate using double dice and I don't have my like wound counters, the magnetic ones. I usually do it uh, like going down. So I mark how many wounds have been taken down of a model. But then when I go to my infantry, which are custodies are all multi-wound, I do the opposite. So I mark how many wounds they have lost. So at times, like if the game, it's turn 4 and a model like a dreadnought was sitting behind a wall all the time, but somehow lost a wound due to mortal wounds because something exploded. I'm not entirely sure if this is actually, it's on 3 wounds, or has it lost 3 wounds? And I noticed that this happens like with vehicles mainly, because I just don't want to use 2 dice stacked on the base or something like that. So does that happen, or has that ever happened to you, or is it only me because I'm special? And if it has happened to you, do you have any ways of mitigating it?
Well,
Yeah, go on.
which one?
Get on.
Okay. So wound counters, as you mentioned, if you don't have them, you probably should have them.
Hmm.
And if you still don't want to have them, like I do, because I keep like losing stuff, I just steal the wound counters from my opponent and give him back after the game, because
Glad you mentioned
Clever.
that.
yeah. Overall, when I played the game, I had only my one CP dice that is mine, and maybe some small dice that I use to have angles, and everything else
Mhm.
I try to use from my opponent.
Mhm.
Uh, Obviously, if I have like a 9-inch deep strike and so on, I have tools like this. But if it comes to dice themselves, I only use my opponent dice, and very often my opponent might also have the wound counter, so I just use one, so we don't mix them up. So yeah, that's what
Hmm.
I kind of do. Uh, Also, another point, and it's specific for Dicrons. If you play Dicrons, you really like do a lot of stuff with your wounded models, so it's harder to forget, and then you get very annoyed when your praise drops to 1 wound, because no matter how good you roll, you cannot get another brave. So
Hmm.
there's a much emotional attachment to wounded models, so it's easier to remember. So just play Necrons.
Yeah, the next thing you will learn. Have you ever experienced this problem, or are you more organized than I and hasn't happened?
And it hasn't happened, I want to say, because once during one of my first GTs, I have had a disagreement with my opponent on that very topic. So I was marking wounds left. I was pretty sure that he was doing the same thing, and then it turned out that he thought otherwise. We went with his version, and it heavily impacted the game, because obviously the model was still alive when it should have been dead. I'm quite comfortable with that way around, and ever since, whenever a first wound is dealt, I agree with, or at least try to agree with my opponent. How are you marking this, and stick to it. So, and I usually pressure them to mark them in a way how many wounds are left, so that obviously I know how much more damage needs to be dealt to that particular unit or model, as how many wounds have been lost by said model unit. It doesn't really help you to plan things further, right? At
Yeah,
least in
especially that you
my
don't have to
opinion.
remember all wound counts of all models on the table. So,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, all right. Gito, any other things? Any other ideas that you forget?
What do I forget on the table? Uppy Downies. Oh, that's a good one.
Oh yeah, that's a very good one.
So I recently
Agreed.
added some Ophidians to the list, and I was keep forgetting to pick them up at the end of my opponent's turn. So for me, the solution was I tell my opponent before the game that I gonna uppy downy them every time unless I say otherwise, and it's pretty much it's if you want to keep unit like this, in especially if the unit is not like a huge damage dealer but something you do missions with, then this solution should work, because for them to stay on the table you need to very good reason. So you need to notice during your opponent turn, oh okay, they can charge something, or I want to use them for something to hold objectives or something else, right? So you usually need a very good reason to not up down them. So that's the simple solution to the simple problem. The bigger problem is if you have like a uppy downy that is maybe once per game, or it's very important unit that not always want to uppy downy. Then I don't really have a good solution, but I tend to forget it sometimes.
Okay, yeah, I totally agree.
Should have played more Hypercrypt in Ghetto, then it would have been in your blood
No, that's
to uppy
so
downy.
lazy. So lazy. You need to plan, not just fix your mistakes with Happy Downy. Stop.
Yeah, well, um, I know that I have a similar problem, and when playing Stories and including Calidus, the Calidus assassin, it becomes especially troublesome when I also play Alarus, because those are two uppy downies that work in a different way. Because the Calidus needs to come down in the very next round after you pick her up, but the Alaris can come back whenever they want. So I sometimes mix them up, or I sometimes get confused. But I noticed that the reason why this happens is because there is just so much stuff happening at the end of the round, and we want to quickly get to like our turn and so on, that at least in my case, I forget about picking them up, and I already think about like getting the new objectives or something like that, because at the end of the round, you put down the points, you discard the cards, you already are with your thought process in the next round. So my advice on how to tackle this would be to have this more structured approach, or just have a piece of paper in front of you in your admin area that actually says phases and lists them, like command phase, movement phase, shooting phase, charge phase, combat phase, end of the round phase, or the, it's not a phase actually, but you can call it like that. And just at every turn when you play, just go through those things, mark, or make a mental note when one begins and when the other ends. And then I did that yesterday, and it didn't work because I didn't pick up the calendars anyway. But this is an idea that I came up with after the game to try in the next game. So it hasn't been tested yet, but I believe firmly that it will work.
Mm.
Joker, how do you tackle that?
Well, I tackled it in the way that I don't recall having any any units with that option. So I've played Thousand Suns, but the uppy down is once per game, and it's in your command phase, so it's a little bit different. You get a little more time to think. You get to see your cards, so it's a bit of a different decision process.
So not bringing
Uh,
Appy Downy is the ultimate
Not
solution.
bringing uppy down is the ultimate solution. Yeah, but I've also got the strat. So I usually remember if I have a strat, and then at the end of my opponent's turn, I should take a moment. Usually, so obviously sometimes I forget. Hold up, let me think if I want to uppy downy, with my thingy. But it's also, I think, because it's not automatic. It costs me something, so it's a little bit. There's that condition that kind of
Hmm.
makes remembering it a little bit easier, at least for me. So yeah, there you have it. Uh,
Hmm.
I try to not have the problem.
Okay. So maybe to just to segue into another thing, we'll get to maybe your idea in a second, but this just popped into my head. Mm,
Mhm.
and it's also an explanation why I forget about Appy Downy and so on. And this is, I don't know if you feel like this as well, but at times it feels like either the game, the pace of the game is such that I lose the track of, like, for example, when my opponent's phases start and finish. Um, and this also might lead to why I forget Appy Downy. And I mean, sometimes there is no pause between my opponent's movement phase and shooting phase. So,
Mm.
he just puts down the last model and goes, okay, this shoots this, and so on. And because of that, either ingress doesn't happen or picking something up doesn't happen, and so on and so on. So again, I've printed a piece of paper that actually says this phase, this phase, this phase, this phase, and I'm just going to put like little ticks with my pen because I like to do everything in writing, whatever I do. So I'm just going to tick this phase down, this phase down, this phase down, this phase down, and then if I still make mistakes, it's completely on me. So
Mm.
hopefully not.
Yeah, that's a good point you mentioned with the uh, your opponent's phases not being like uh, strictly separated one from another, and not having like a mental, not having time to make like a mental note we going to another phase. And I think it's a sign of very good gentleman play when your opponent says at the end of his movement, that's the end of my movement, and gives like a quick blink, let's
Hmm.
say, if
Yeah,
you want to ingress, right? And
yeah.
then another time at the end of the his turn, it's like that's the end of my turn, blink, or quote unquote blink, right? Uh,
It works.
so I try to do it when I play the game. Obviously, sometimes you forget to uh, do it to your opponent because you are so fascinated and you want to shoot him so much
Mhm.
that you just skip it and you just go to shooting immediately. But this is a, I think, very good thing to include in your gentleman play, just to have like a that's the end of my movement phase. You don't necessarily need to say your opponent, do you want to ingress? You could, but just mention like a quick breaks in the key moments, So yeah, especially if like you made that charge, so you move all the models, say, okay, that's charge finish. Do you want to do anything? Like that's also a very good thing to like keep in your, let's say, gentleman play.
Hmm.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
you
totally agree.
and also sometimes I ask my opponent to tell me when the movement phase ends, so I can ingress. But you can use it both ways. You can just you don't need to want to ingress, but you want to stress your opponent. You can ingress to do like a small mind game that doesn't hurt anyone really. So you
Yeah,
just
but you also
tell me when the movement ends, right? I need to think about it.
it's actually good because you put the accountability on your opponent, and you know you don't have to think about it, or you have to, but now you have two people thinking about it.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. You share the burden.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, communication is key, right? And that's the solution to this problem in most cases. And yeah, I think it's just also being able to like barge in into what your opponent is doing. So if they're like moving swiftly on, you also have to be able to just say, "Well, hold up.
Hold on. Hmm.
Yeah, I'm doing some. I want to do something. I have the option to do something. Let me have a think." Yeah, no, I think that's something you can't be shy about, which might
Yeah,
be difficult for some people, right? But just kind of have to be able to do it.
Yeah,
yep.
to smooth it out, you just put the clock on yourself, right? And you have
Yeah, that's
a
something.
like 10-second thing every time it happens, right? It's
Hmm.
you probably don't gonna do it, but you still make like this quick break, then this habit of, change the clock and let me think about it.
Yep. And it's also, I think, and we repeat this every single time, but it is just so important if you're not doing it, playing by intent and talking about your intent to your player, because if you mention to them, say, when discussing your armies before the game, or like at the beginning of the phase, I have this unit, it can ingress, and I would like to ingress, and then your opponent plays, finishes movement, goes into shooting, you go like, yeah, sure. And then your opponent might actually go and say, well, yeah, but you said that you wanted to ingress. Would you like to do that now? I mean, again, he needs to be a gentleman to do that. We hope we all are gentlemen and we do that. But this is just another way of making it, foolproof or something, that you do get to ingress when you want, or you do whatever else needs to be done between the phases or at the beginning of the phase. So, yeah. Joker?
Uh, I'll segue into another point that we've got. Remembering about your own phases and units that you want to activate, you want to do something with. I mean, I've had a game not that long ago, and it's a bit embarrassing to admit, maybe. But I was, I started planning everything, started moving my units, and then I forgot to deep strike like 2 units of Flamer Acolytes because
Mm.
I got so consumed by, planning
The
on
tunnel vision.
what do I shoot with what to ensure that I kill like 2, 3 crucial units of my opponent that I only realized in the middle of the shooting phase that I should have another unit shooting at this thingy that was still alive, annoyingly. So, and I think that becomes more important towards the end of the game where you've got little time left on the clock. You're trying to do only the crucial things, and then it turns out that, oh yeah, but I could have also moved this unit and shoot that bolt pistol, which might have plunked that last wound off of something. So it's kind of just making sure and checking with yourself that you've actually done everything you could have done within a given phase before moving on to the next one.
Mm.
I couldn't agree more. I catch myself sometimes, um, like before a tournament. Uh, this was when I discovered that Telemons could have 24 shots with devastating wounds. So I've spent, I don't know, an hour or 2 hours on a Friday evening with 24 dice, just rolling them on my bed, checking how many devastating wounds I can get, and just fixating myself on, oh yeah, I'm gonna do so many devastating wounds when I play my opponent in the tournament, and so on and so on. And then my turn came. The Telemon was in the right place. The opponent was there, could be easily shot. And I just started rolling like, yeah, look at all the devastating wounds I'm gonna do. And my opponent was like, dude, you didn't move your units. Are you sure you want to do that? And I'm like, oh Jesus, that's embarrassing. I'm so sorry. Okay, thank you. And I actually started moving models first, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Tunnel vision and fixating on the cool stuff like a kid. But I hope we are all guilty of that, not just me.
Yeah. I think I
The
do that.
awkward silence time.
I think I do that with reanimation. That I start reanimating and putting models in places before I draw cards very often. But then I drew cards and I changed the position when I reanimated. It doesn't really change much in that case. It's
Hmm.
not like shooting Telemon before you move everything. That's a little bit different. Uh,
I
but I
mean, it
think,
could
but it happens to be a little bit too, right?
could be quite impactful, right? If you position a model on the other side of the unit to make it closer to, I don't know, containment or
Yes,
taking
yes,
an objective
that's a
that
huge
you didn't
change.
plan to. Yeah.
But the order of things happening is that you should draw the card first, so you have the information, so you can put it somewhere else, and it don't affect the game
Yeah.
because you
Okay.
don't
Fair
roll
enough.
any dice. You don't roll any dice, so you can change it afterwards, and it's fine, right?
Mm,
And if you already
yeah.
roll
Okay.
and you see that you did another Telemon helping your bro kill something because you rolled not that many devastating wounds
Devastating.
I was
Yeah.
thinking, right? So then there's become a problem.
Mm. Thank you, Gustav. Thank you for actually, saving me and saying that it sometimes happens to you as well. I'm not a total scrap.
Yeah,
Uh, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that on this topic we can actually move to the next point we've got, which is screening out opposition deep strike reserves, and
Mm.
probably something that's maybe even a little harder to do or easier to forget. So a potential rapid ingress. Um, so sometimes, yeah, you want to just rush into the rolling dice bit, and you forget to move a unit, or maybe you forget to at least declare it. Okay, I've got the movement. I can move the stuff that's sitting on my home objective to be able to screen out, but I'm not going to bother because it's a bit obvious, etc., etc. So that can also happen, and it can really catch you off guard if the opponent takes advantage of it. So how do you keep focus is something that seems to be prevalent here rather than maybe remembering per se. Tweak, does that happen to you?
I mean, I wanted to say that it doesn't, because if there is anything that I pay extremely close attention to, it's screening, and I usually try to position in such a way that I cannot be caught off guard by someone dropping something in my deployment zone. But then again, the existence of, previously the 3-inch deep strike or 6-inch deep strike now, with an army like mine where you play, especially now with this new detachment where you play um a dreadnought spam or vehicle spam, and only a limited amount of infantry, it becomes extremely challenging to screen out the 6-inch deep strike. So on Saturday at the tournament, I was playing versus the new Grey Knights, and I simply forgot that they could do it. It was the first time I was playing the new attachment. They dropped 6 inches away from me in my deployment zone. Luckily, 5 purifiers or purgation squad, I can't remember which one, didn't manage to kill 4 sisters with their shooting. So it didn't bite me in the ass that much. But then I was angry at myself that the thing that I usually pride myself on, that I screen out well and so on, and this one actually could have been easily avoided. Yeah, I didn't pay attention to it, So, and I was complacent, and I thought that, I screened for a 9 inch, we're good, and then no, not really. So yeah, it happens. It happens. Maybe not as frequently, but still, and whenever it happens, it's very humbling. So yeah, Gita, how about you?
Yeah, I think I don't have much problem screening my pipeline ever, really, because when I deploy units, I usually make a mental note to delegate some units to screening, and when I move them forward for any reason, it's quite, I don't know, I still have this thought in my head that I deployed them. When I was deploying them, I was like my intention was that they gonna stay somewhere back to screen, and if I move them forwards, I need to put something else in their place, so it's like usually okay. It's more of a some it happened to me that I forgot to screen ingress in front of me, or forgot to screen something in front of me, and I think that's just a problem in your game plan. If you didn't realize that your opponent have something very important to drop in front of you, it's, you know, just a hole in your game plan, not something you just like easily forget. If your opponent drops something like small and silly in front of you and you forgot, it's fine, right?
Hmm.
uh, and you should avoid it. If you could have a option to screen it, you should have screen it, because he might get like a secondary or something with it. uh, I don't know. I think at this point I just have it in my like back of my mind all the time, to just take as much space off of the table from my opponent, and part of doing that is just screening out as much as you
Hmm.
can. So even if I make like consolidation move, charge moves, I very often try to position the models in such a way that they not only fighting something, but they also screening deep strike as much as they can. And
Hmm.
for like forgetting it, not forgetting at this point is, I don't know. I
Yeah, it,
don't I
it
don't think I forget that much. I think it's like part of the game plan, and you do it automatically at some point.
I think it happens even earlier because it essentially it's baked into your list building. Like
Yeah.
you take action monkeys and you take, those small units for pushing objectives or something like that, and at the same time you use them for like backline holding and pushing away deep strikes and so on and so on. And then if you intend on taking something like infiltrators or a navigator or something that pushes deep strikes away even further, then it solves half of the problem for you anyway. So
Mm,
I think it happens on the list building level. I know it does
yeah.
for me.
Yeah, I would agree. Like you usually have like this cheap retards unit to stay on your backline, and it usually it's not a mistake to position them in such a way that you don't need to move them at all during the game.
Mm,
It's very often not a problem. It with some units that maybe have a sticky, or at some point you can push them forward because whatever reason. Obviously, it might be something you might have considered, but having them in the right place and then changing it because you want to do something in next turn or whatever, it's a better solution to have them, I don't know, in the wrong place, and then needing to remember to position them properly, right?
mm-hmm,
So even if you turn one don't need to screen, and by deploying them in the correct position, let's say, you don't exposing them to your opponent, why don't do it from the start and just have, don't wait. It's not even like clock managing thing. You don't need to move those models if they are in the correct position. And I'm talking on the back, obviously it's screening your backline, right?
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep,
This
totally.
actually th- this actually takes me to and reminds me of a thing that I wanted to talk about as well, which uh, partially happened on Saturday when I was at the tournament, but it might be a topic for someone, especially if your opponent like stores his units in a box or something like that, which also happened. So remembering about your opponents reserves or reserved units. And this is actually something that, as I mentioned, it happened on Saturday. I was playing against one of our local guys who was playing GSC, and it wasn't as much as I forgot about his reserves as uh, GSC, because he was playing GSC, has just so much shit that it was difficult for me to keep track of what in that like group over there is like victims of my shooting or something, and which one is yet to come onto the table. So I wasn't sure because my opponent essentially he had like a safe and sound box on which in one corner his deep strike units would sit, and then the rest of the box, like cover of the box, was units that I've killed. And it at some point it just sort of all blended together, and I just couldn't tell how many things he has left in deep strike. So I had to ask, I had to verify, and so on. But also in the game against Grey Knights, I remembered what he had because like I'm used to playing Grey Knights and I know the army composition more or less and how many like Dread Knights there are or something. But my opponent actually kept the box with his reserved units under the table. So for someone who doesn't play Grey Knights often, or for someone who is just not used to it, you very very easily get into that conviction that what you see on the table is what you get and nothing more. So yeah, how do you tackle that? I mean, Joker, have you ever suffered from something like that, that you forgot about his deep strike or something?
I've kind of been the offending party. Playing GSC recently, my models are also, a mess. So sometimes, something is still in reserve, something already died and is about to come back, something just died. Yeah, and it's a total mess. So I'm sorry to anyone that I've played, and if it was an issue for them. How do I keep track of it? I don't know. I can't suggest anything better than just to keep communicating with your opponent. What have they got still in reserve? What's actually dead? If you see some model standing somewhere, just make just double check by asking, "Hey, what's that doing here? I thought I killed that. Oh yeah, you did. It's just I didn't put it away. Okay, that's fine, cool. That's it really. But also, yeah, make sure that you're tidy with your stuff, so you ensure that your opponent doesn't have these issues, and also that it doesn't impact yourself. That you're wondering, hey, has this been killed? Can I still use this? And then you start planning using that unit, but your opponent reminds you, hey, I killed that 2 turns ago. Bummer.
Yep,
My game
bummer.
plan just went into the
Out the window.
hit the fan. Yeah, out the window. Gita,
Yeah.
from what I
So
know, you're quite a messy player outside of TTS. So
I
have
do.
you had these issues?
Obviously, I did at some point, but I think the thing that happens more often to me is I not always, but I usually remember my opponent deep strikes and reserves. The thing that happened to me quite often, and I even left some models and leave the playing field, let's say, was I forget about my reserves sometimes. So I
Hmm.
just forget to bring something on the table. If I don't have it near me and in like when I'm playing and I don't have them in my view, so they are under the table because there's no enough space around the table, I very often forget to bring the units I have to the table from reserves and just forget about them. And I recently left a couple of models in the playing store. It's really a playing bar, but in the
Hmm.
place where I play, and I needed to pick them up like a couple days later from the owner of the place. So I'm offender of this kind that I just forget to bring my stuff on the table. And what works for me, if I have a space next to the table, let's say admin space, as Tweak mentioned, I usually have the models in one place and I don't forget them. And if my opponent doing the same, I also don't forget. things gets more complicated when you don't have space or your opponent want to keep them in the box and so on. But I think you guys mentioned a little bit how you can handle it.
Yeah, it's really great when the venue where you're playing actually has this extra table space where you can just place stuff. It's not always a thing. Uh, I know that when I used to have a table at home, like a playing table, it was just enough to put the mat on it and play. So you needed to use all the shelves and the sofas and everything around to keep your models. But when you go tournament and the tournament actually allows you to have some admin area, as we said, that's fantastic. That's really helpful. All right, Joker. Any other ideas that come to your mind?
And yeah, I'm looking at the list and I'm thinking, think I wanna, yeah, how about this one? Remembering niche rules like +1 AP when shooting from floors, or remembering how aircraft work, how towering, maybe more than Titanic, works nowadays, but also datasheet abilities that don't always come into play. I've got a bad example here, but it's just me. I always forget that the Kelomorph after shooting makes you take a battleshock test, or the opponent who's on the receiving end. Maybe there are more abilities like that that don't exactly spring to mind at this moment. So, Gito, do you remember all your datasheet abilities and all of the core rules, like +1 AP shooting from a ruined floor?
Plunging fire, you say?
If it's
Yeah,
called like that, yes.
Okay,
it is a
you got
plunging
me there.
fire. I did
Mic
use
drop.
it because I was playing guard for a little bit, and if you put Aquilons with the flamer on the highest floor, you get to get the plunging fire twice. So yeah, that was fun. Uh, in
Massively fun.
general, I remember my rules pretty well because I spent so much time writing list and like making micro adjustments in the list that I usually remember my rules on the models. For the opponents, I you probably usually also remember, but I don't know if you guys have something like that. But during a planning of my turn, I always try to, because most of the units have only one special rule, so you always want to like keep in mind how far your opponent moves, and it's also you want to keep in mind that one special rule that your opponent unit might have, like usually must have. So I would say I very often ask my opponent if I don't remember something, but I remember to ask it because in previous editions, when you don't have abilities on your datasheets or as much abilities on your datasheets, let's say, and there is like a billion stratagems, that was a different issue. But this edition, when everyone gets to do something special, I would say I just have them in my like mental schematic of doing the planning of you need to know where your opponent can move, and just after that step is what's the special role the unit have. So
Hmm.
because everyone have it, so
Yep.
if I look at something and I don't remember their special rule, it means I forgot the special rule, right? And some time ago it could mean that they don't have any, and now they have some still.
Yep. I think this particular point applies more to me than the two of you because I some people would say I'm a slow learner. I prefer to call it empirical learner because I prefer to learn by experience, by actually seeing and being on the receiving end of an ability. So, like, I even if I do some, like, I like doing things that are maybe out of the box or go against the flow because I want to check for myself that something sucks. Like, and then when I see on the table that the unit that everyone says sucks actually sucks and doesn't bring any value on the table, that's the way I learn. So this applies also, for example, now when the new detachment is out, or all the new detachments are out, and I'm testing units that I haven't used for a longer while, like say Virtus Praetors, so the Custodes bikes. I haven't used them ever actually before because when they were great, I didn't play Custodes. Then they became crap. Now they are okay, and I only like assembled my Custodes bikes 2 weeks ago, maybe. So I did put two of them on the table on Saturday, and in 3 games, only in the last one did I remember that they actually inflict mortal wounds when they fly over something. And I blame it on the fact that this is just a unit that I haven't been using before, and I need to learn that they have it and that it has an application. But since I tend to use them more as a um, and maybe that's bad, mission scoring unit, like a unit that is there to do containments and engagements and blah blah blah. I don't tend to like get them very near to an opponent unless this is tactically necessary. So uh, yeah, I more often than not forget that they actually do a flyby or a flyover and do mortal wounds. And the same applies to an Alaris captain that I like having a captain with my Alaris, and he has this ability that I think once per game or twice per game, when he gets damaged, he turns all the damage to damage one. No matter like if it's 6, 5, it just becomes one. The problem with that ability is that you need to announce it at the beginning of the fight phase, and he is usually surrounded by a unit of Alaris. So this rule hardly ever comes into play anyway, and I just
Hmm.
forget about it. So there are rules like that that you simply forget because they don't come to play.
Yeah, I would forget that one too, actually,
Yeah, because
because he's if it's like by himself or he and like one dude maybe, but if it's like a huge unit of Alaris, I wouldn't like most of the time think ahead and calculate how much damage the unit can take, so then he can get damaged.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little
I
bit of
guess we're trying
more
to say,
mental work.
Mhm. We're trying to say, GW, please change that rule to something better.
Yeah, when he gets damaged the first time, you should have an option to activate it, probably.
Yeah, like at that very moment, not before the fight actually happens. Agreed. Okay, good talk. Anything on your mind? Any other things that you, as a pro player, like forget or might have forgotten in one of your recent games? Just so that we feel a little bit better that people on the pro level also forget stuff.
Okay, I
Maybe all
think.
just comes from playing repeatedly, and that's our problem.
Maybe.
Yeah, playing a lot helps, but obviously I still forget some stuff. So I very often forget the little secondary mission rule,
Oh, okay.
and
Hmm.
it happened to me a lot. Usually it's not a big deal because I mean recently it wasn't a big deal because I'm playing almost exclusively Star Shatter and I
Hmm.
have zero battle lines, so like
Same here.
half of the special rules don't apply to me, like the mission rules.
Hmm.
Those banners don't apply, like swift action and so on, like they don't apply to me. Uh, but I tend to forget this one the most. If I think about what things I forget during the game, I think the secondary mission rule, and I had like a very oh fuck moment on one of the. I think it might have been WTC, maybe not, but
One of
like
those small tournaments, yeah.
no. Like it was. I remember it was like a big tournament, and I forget that there was like a smoke and mirrors or something. I forget what it is, but it basically says you cannot use the core stratagems
Oh yeah, in the
during the
first round.
first battle round. Yeah, and I wanted to protect like one of my units with Overwatch from the unit of warp spiders. and my opponent makes the move, and I say, "Haha, Overwatch," and he
And then
said,
he goes, haha.
"Well, yeah, haha." Yeah, so I have that happen to me. Fortunately, the dice went my way, and my opponent did like 3 mortal wounds with 5 man units, which was like,
Mhm.
okay, I guess I don't waste SCP, but it could have ended very badly. And I remember that very like thing that I forget the most is the secondary mission rule, and I still don't have a good solution to it.
Mhm.
Um, I see some people carry the primary, secondary mission cards with them and put them near the place when they keep their secondaries. So you every time you reach out for secondaries or you bring secondaries, you at least have a chance to noticing that you might be missing something.
Mhm.
But other than that, I don't have any idea how you can improve it.
So I think, I mean, I do or did suffer from that problem as well, but this mainly is because if I participate in a tournament, it's usually a 3 round tournament. And when it's a 3 round local tournament, that means that a great majority of the missions do not get played. Uh, at the so missions like, let's say, ritual, or I guess burden of trust is the one where you have to guard units.
Mm,
Sorry, guard objectives. Like, I haven't played burden of trust, I don't know, ever since I came back. So I only played that like 2 days ago for the first time when I was teaching a new player how to play the game, and we randomly drew this one in TTS. But yeah, I would say that this happens mainly because some missions just don't get played that often. Um, my way of dealing it, something that I designed and started doing, if you go to, like, after watching this, obviously, if you go to our um, channel on YouTube, you'll see that there is a new playlist added uh, on Contact Lost YouTube, and it's mission videos, or something like WTC mission videos. There's only 3 of them, but that's mainly because there were only 3 played at the tournament that I went to. And this list is going to grow with the tournaments that I go to. But I felt that since I've taken up upon myself building up and growing the TTS community in, like, the north of Poland, or in Tree City, um, I wanted to encourage people to get TTS and start playing on it by showing them uh, what it actually looks like and what you could do in it. So I started recording like those 1 minute long videos where um, before the tournament, like the day or 2 days before the tournament, when the missions and the tables are already known, uh, I generate that on TTS. I circle the table, with the camera a bunch of times to basically demonstrate what table layout is, what the firing lanes are, and then I hover over to the TTS or the FTC table mission cards, and I just pick them up and show them on the screen highlighted, like, this is the mission we are playing. Pause it, read it. This is the secondary that we are using. Pause it, read it. And that's it. It's like a 1 minute video. And I actually see that thanks to doing that, I come prepared for the event better
mm,
because I put some effort into it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to an event, make sure you read the mission pack and you get acquainted with it. Ideally, it should shape what your list is going to be as well, because you'll know what the missions are, what is necessary to do them, what the tables are. Like, if you're playing WTC tables and your land raider cannot go through walls, well, maybe don't bring a land raider because you're going to have a tough time or something like that. So you should be doing that anyway. But that would be my advice. Just get acquainted with what is going with, like, what missions and what tables are going to be used at the event, so it doesn't catch you off guard.
mm. Yeah, I think it's a good solution for the single tournaments. For teams, it's a little bit more complicated, right? Because you're gonna be playing on different tables. But it's a good idea. I would say it's a very good idea for
Mm,
singles.
okay. Um, I don't know, Joker. Any other ideas? Gito, any other ideas?
No.
Looking at the list, core strats. I don't think we've quite mentioned about this.
Oh yeah, you
But
know, we didn't.
I did take a look at the list of the core strats, and to my surprise, I found that I've been using most of them, maybe apart from Go to Ground and Smoke Screen, but that's only because I don't think I've played a unit that has the necessary
Hmm.
keyword in 10th. So
You'd
just type
never
of the up
put
down
Rhino on
you
the table?
see, there you go. I have put rhinos on the table. I've never bothered to spend CP to smoke screen them.
You just play them
So
safe.
yeah, that or with a short stint of 12-inch loan up Nurgle strat, just use that instead. But yeah, go to ground is definitely something I probably could use with GSC, but I don't remember the existence of it. I don't even remember what it does exactly. It's cover and a 6+ invo.
That's
Yep.
exactly what it is. I
Phew,
actually,
that is
I
so good.
actually use it a lot with custodies, just because like losing every single one of them is so painful. But I recall, like, when I was making a decision which army to play, I was greatly influenced by Lesiu's WTC list, which I adored, and I thought, yeah, this is exactly what I want and what I want to play. But I remember reading the Polish Discord and people discussing this list and asking, like, what stratagems do you use? Shield health stratagems, are they useful? And I remember Lesiu said, nah, hardly any. The core stratagems are the most ones that I spend like my CP on. So it made me actually go and read the the core stratagems. And yeah, custodies don't have grenade, so I don't get to use that. But I actually reminded myself, because it's easy to forget, that there is something like the epic challenge one, where your character can challenge a character if they are in a fight and close to one another, and you can actually pick up an enemy character that is giving some buffs to the unit or something like that with this simple trick, um, which I was completely oblivious to. So, and especially now with the Blade Champion with a 4 damage weapon and devastating wounds, it's highly like, or the weapon with precision, it's highly likely that you are going to get that and do that. So I'm definitely like sharpening my teeth and to use that in a game, but I haven't used it yet. But definitely, again, going to a tournament, read the rule book. Just, I mean, I know it sounds trivial, but do go back to the rule book from time to time, and you might actually notice that you find some surprises over there. Like we mentioned, flyers, Titanic units, core stratagems, shooting from a floor. Like when ask yourself the question, listener, when was the last time you've put something on the floor? And maybe it's worth it when you deep strike or when you ingress or something like this. So yeah, just read the rule book.
Yeah. I would add also that depending on an army, some of the core stratagems are really, really prevalent, and in some armies it doesn't happen much. So a good example of it is playing Necrons versus playing Guard. Necrons don't have any smoke because obviously they are too advanced to use one of the strongest defensive stratagems for vehicles.
Hmm.
So they don't have smoke, and the guard have smoke everywhere pretty much. So having experience playing one or the other, and that is the same for the grenade. Like the mortal wounds from grenades are too old fashioned for Necrons, so they don't have a way to dealing some like mortal wounds to, I don't know, incarn or something else that is very hard to kill.
Hmm.
Uh, but they do have access to tank shock, which I didn't use that much until I play guard and I have zero melee almost, and you sometimes need to deal some mortal wounds to your opponent without falling back.
Hmm.
So I think it really depends on the army you play, how much the core stratagems impact you.
Yeah.
Uh, So the easy ones are, if you have access to smoke, that's one of the strongest stratagems you can use defensively. Uh, because it gives you both cover and stealth. So it's quite a big buff.
Yeah,
Mm. The
absolutely.
another one, grenade, very useful in certain situations because it
Hmm.
doesn't trigger abilities that you when you get damaged, and it also like in some cases very small insignificant units can deal quite a bit of damage to something very expensive and important with that grenade.
Hmm.
So just going through those, as you mentioned, going back and checking which ones are relevant for your army is a good thing to do.
Yeah,
And for some armies, you, as you mentioned, use the core stratagems a lot. For some others, you might don't have a ability to even use them, and some of that you could use are not as important. So yeah,
yeah.
it depends.
I recently had a discussion like after the Saturday tournament. I was talking to another Custodies player from like here uh, locally. And he looked at my list and he was like simply curious, right? What do you see in the Contemptor Dreadnoughts? Because they look lackluster. Like 2 shots from multi-melta strength 9, 5 attacks. You whiff some of them. Uh, sounds meh. And I was like, well, okay, that's you're entitled to your opinion, but they do come back out on a 2-up, and then they can tank shock every single time. And like in every game that I played at the tournament and every game afterwards, and I've played like 3 games since Saturday, every single game the Contemptor does at least 3 mortal wounds, sometimes more, just because it charges, just because it tank shocks. So do consider the core stratagems because you might see your units in a new light thanks to them. So yeah, I think it's a valuable takeaway. So that's that. Um, One thing that I noticed that annoys the hell out of me, and this happens against Joker, and it pisses me off every single time. And then it happened, I think, in a game versus one of our like freshmen who was playing the Corn detachment. No, was it that? One of my recent games anyway, with the surge moves. This is just
Mm.
something that I constantly forget because for me, this is still a novelty that you can have either a unit that I shoot and it moves away, or a unit that I move close to and they move away. And I guess I constantly find it hard to remember. I get warned about it by the opponent, but every single time I forget that they have it, and it affects my game plan a lot. So here, my question goes to you: how do you, or what do you do to remember that? Because I actually need a piece of advice on what to do, not to forget about it. Joker, I don't know. Let's start with you because you have surge moves. You are aware of them probably more than I do because my army doesn't. So.
Hmm. Well, yeah, I've been badly touched by surge moves before. When on the other occasion I do forget about them, but again, this is just really you need to one ask your opponent about them, and then just plan your way around it from start to end of your movement phase, so that you obviously don't get caught out in any subsequent phases with something that totally mitigates your entire plan for the turn, right? So if I don't know, just somewhat mark maybe that unit that can surge, and just put one of the plastic rulers with it, and make sure you just stay 7 inches away from it, and that's it. That's something you can do. Yeah, I mean on TTS with you've got yellow scribed units, you can just put out the 7-inch ring from the models. That makes it
Hmm.
super easy. Which is probably the best way. Just mark it at the beginning, keep it, and yeah, plan accordingly. Your turn. I mean, it's a very annoying ability, but it's not something that you can't play around, especially now after it's been changed a little bit in in the not this data slate, but I think the
One
one
of the
before.
data states.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, okay. The TTS advice with the circle is actually a simple but a good one. I'm gonna start using it. I need to figure out how to mark it on the table, but I hope that
Well,
before the next tournament I'll just memorize it.
I could just use
yeah,
dice, right? Measure, put
to
dice
for
down.
to don't forget it during your round, because you still need to remember it at some point in the movement, but sometimes you remember something, you think about something else, and then you forget again. So if someone has this kind of rule, I just make like a, I don't know, a circle, or like a little, I put a little bit of dice on the edge of his surge move ability, or his surge move effective range. And even if I move into it, I make a conscious decision doing it. And once I put it down, like if I think about something else and then go back to this idea, uh, I have something to remind me that he has a surgery, but at some point you need to remember it, right? So it's not really advice how to avoid not remembering it at all. And
Mm,
also, just to help, I think I do it almost against. uh, If I didn't play something like 20 times, or I don't know, 20 times maybe too much, like a lot of times, and I'm very well aware what my opponent army does. If I played something like first time, or like third time even, I very often go through like a quick mental checklist of what things to ask my opponent before the game, and there are like things that we discussed, I think last episode or one of the
hmm
episodes that I was here, that you ask how do you treat cocked dice, how do you count wounds going up, going down, and like a lot of small things you could ask your opponent before the game. It makes it just way easier for both of you to play it. And one of those things I ask is, do you have some deep strike shenanigans? Do you have some uppy downy? Do you have some surge moves? Uh,
Reactive
yeah,
moves and so on and so on. Yeah.
reactive moves and so on. So there's like a couple things that are pretty universal between different armies, and not every army has it, but there are like game changers. So for me, it's top four of my head. Infiltration. Do you have infiltration? Do you have scout? Do you have some deep strike shenanigans? Can you get closer to me? Can you reposition units that are already on the table? Can you deep strike like closer to me? Can you reposition those units? And do you have any reactive moves, surge moves, and so on? Right. So
Yeah.
those are like easily the things you can ask your opponent pretty much every game, and
hmm
even have like a list. It will never hurt you to ask them. If you forget during the game after that, well, I don't have a good solution for you,
I
but
mean,
it's reminding you, right?
yeah.
Another step.
There is a solution, I guess. That I mean, I'm call me old school, but I like the good old pen and paper sort of method. And I always, when I go to a tournament, I make sure that I have my notebook with me. I usually count points in a notebook, not in like application on the phone,
Mm.
because I'm paranoid because Joker told me that tabletop battles doesn't count points correctly. Uh, so I just
That's
prefer to
actually
you,
true.
there you go. So I just do this on paper to be sure and to show my opponent and say, like, yeah, like, let's go through this together. Let's count the points together. Um, you have access to it. I have access to it. That's fair. So just make notes when your opponent tells you, like, this has this and this range that it can shoot. Write it down. When he says, this and this unit has a surge move, make a note. Or you can use something like this. So like those small sticky notes. I just make a note on them, put them on or next to the unit on the table, and I know that this can do this can do that, and so on. Later, you just scrap them and throw them away. But with those little sticky ones, you do see them on the table, so you will not miss them, like a small toke, for example. Um, and it can help you not to forget stuff. So I
Uh,
recommend pen and paper.
I would vandalize the terrain with those sticky notes. Just put them on the big ruins
That is an idea. Yeah, you
for
can do
you
that.
for
Everywhere.
you to remember, right?
Yeah, but I still strongly recommend it. Like I do it all the time, and this is probably the best thing that I mean the best means of not forgetting. Just putting sticky notes
Mm.
on stuff. So yeah. Right, Joker. I'm out of ideas. Don't know about you, but if you are also out of ideas, and Gita is also out of ideas, and so it
Yeah,
seems,
I'm empty.
yeah, perhaps
I've
you.
got one. I actually
Oh,
have
go on.
one maybe worth mentioning. I mean, we've got two on the list here, but remembering opponent strats, I mean, you can't really do much about it other than communicate. But remembering your own secondaries is maybe something that's worth actually paying attention to. Had a number of times that I just forget what I was supposed to do
I had a bunch
and
of
had
times
to
when I
look at
forgot
the
to draw
card
them.
like to, a number of times just to remind myself. But I don't really know what one can do about it. Like stick the cards to your eyes, and then you can't move your models because you can't see them. I don't know.
Again,
Well,
admin area.
yeah,
Admin area, yeah, I guess.
admin area, and the other thing is, for me, it's easier to remember what secondaries are in play, both for me and my opponent, because your opponent's secondary sometimes edge cases might be important. Do you heroic? Do you stratagem defensively at specific unit to deny your opponent points, and moving your stuff to do stuff on the table like to engage to secondary missions. I finding very much so easier to remember if they are just cards, not something on an app. So for
Hmm.
me, app.
I don't know if we lost Gita or
Yeah,
if
me
he
neither.
just
Or he
he
stops
just stopped
talking.
talking out of nowhere. I think we might have lost him because he's so quiet. Um, which again is
Yeah, it
just
sounds like the latter.
yeah, yeah. So again, probably
Hello.
another.
Ah,
Now
there
we
he
can
is.
hear you, and he's gone.
Gone again.
Uh, and he's gone completely. All right, Joker. I think it's time for us to close session. Would you like to do the honor of leading us
Yeah,
out?
so everyone, thanks for joining in. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And if you like what we do, please remember to like, subscribe, share, what have you, and consider becoming one of our patrons, as that helps us immensely. A massive thank you to the Army Painter Weyland-Yutani for their sponsorship. And yeah, I think with that, we will bid you a goodbye and be back next week with another show on an unknown topic.
The random one. And by the way, if you have any ideas of your own how to memorize things, how to remember about them, how to tackle amnesia, do drop a comment under the video or wherever you're watching it, because we're also keen to learn from you. So let's make it a mutual benefit thing, and we will be happy to hear from you. With that, thank you, everyone. Until next time. Bye bye.
Bye bye.